Taking a dip in your hip, a glide in your stride. Welcome to the mothership, the home of the travelers of the universe, with shows throughout the week. Everything you want, everything you could. The network, the RNN. And now, your featured show. Shall we begin?
Hello, and welcome to another wonderful edition of the Otter's Den with my guest, Jean Claire Broida. How are you tonight? Words are going to be a thing tonight, just saying.
Words are going to be a thing tonight, my friend Keith. I am doing fine as frog's hair split 4 ways.
Those are pretty fine.
That's mighty fine.
Hey, you. How you doing? Thank you.
It's been a while. You said it. You posted on Facebook. It's been a while. And I was trying to remember how long a while it's been. Do you remember last time I was on Otter's Den with you?
Either 2 or 3 years.
Dang.
It's been.
Where did the time go? What happened to us?
A lot.
You built a house. You rebuilt your house.
I did.
I saw the office walls go up. Later.
Yeah, it's a process. I do a little every day.
In fact, they're right there.
Yeah. This is my dining room. I was going to do the show from the office tonight, but I didn't get home in time to get everything set up. I've got my old laptop up there, which I actually got working again after the fire. I can't believe that. But
wow.
I've got my movie camera set up on the tripod. I just got to get everything working, and I just didn't have time. I got home late a little bit. Home. Told words. This is acting up.
Today. I know words.
TBI. The words get stuck and they don't come out right. The other day I was literally at work and talking to my coworker, asking her a question about what to do, and something totally oddball came out of my mouth in the middle of the sentence, and she looked at me like, "What?"
Say what?
I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, "You said this." I'm like, "I did." I didn't mean to. I meant to say this. So it happens.
Blame it on the moon.
Blame it on the moon. There we go. We have a full moon.
We do.
Right now.
We do. Woo!
It's
time for all the cryptids to come forth.
Yes, it's the beaver moon.
And howl. Is it the beaver moon?
It's the beaver moon.
Well, there you have it.
Yes, I'm trying not to giggle.
Shine on, beaver moon, up in the sky. Double points if it comes out your nose. That's what we always said.
Yes.
Cheers, darling.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on, which is what I was trying to say a minute ago.
Mm-hmm. I'm seeing some shout outs here. We got Desert Hot Springs, California. I bet it's cold in the hot springs.
It might be.
Am I right, Michelle? Is it cold in the hot springs? And then
it's cold here.
True Crime Mysteries Beyond the Veil says, hi, Miss Jean Claire. Hi back. Hi back at you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so thrilled you asked me to be back on the Otter's Den.
I am too. I'm
pumped. I'm psyched.
I was actually on your show once, wasn't I?
Yes. My short live show. 5 months of trying, getting guests to come on a show, except for me, is like herding cats. Would you agree? Or it can be.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more to giving a show, to hosting a show, shouting out to you, Keith. There's way more to hosting a show than just showing up, changing your clothes, and sliding into the cockpit. There's all this prep work. marketing and media
Homework.
and posters and promotion and self-aggrandizement and feelings of doubt and despair and heights of joy and elation.
Yeah, and scheduling sometimes can be a nightmare. Tech issues can be a nightmare. If I have an author on, I generally like to at least thumb through their book so I have some idea what the book's about. And I'm not a reader. Let me tell you what, I am not a reader.
Did you thumb through my book?
I haven't yet. I'm going to buy that book though.
You don't have to buy it. It's a free read on Kindle Unlimited.
Nice.
If you want to, but I didn't write this book to make money. I wrote this book published in 2018 to declare yet again what the Pentagon announced to be true 2 years later. Only 2 years later, April of 2020, Pentagon says, yeah, UFOs are real, but we don't know what created the craft. The hardware is real, but we can't account for their creation. We don't attribute their creation to creators. What are those creators? E.T. They don't say, we are now saying yes to UFOs, thumbs up on UFOs, and we're going to rename them UAPs at the same time. And we're going to start new task force, new committees, new study groups. Well, come on. Why aren't the likes of Eric von Däniken, should he want to be, Linda Moulton Howe, Richard Dolan, and I'm naming just off the top of my head 3 famous to infamous UFO researchers. Myself, been researching UFOs since I was a teenager. That's more than half my life. There's lots of so-called civilian scientists, independent researchers. Linda Moulton Howe is a bona fide newscaster. She worked in Denver, producing special shows. Forget the exact title, but she was director of a department for a TV, and they sent her forth with a remote TV crew to go film ranchers in Colorado. She broke the story on cattle mutilation by UFOs. She broke that story, really.
Nice.
People had been talking about it, but she got public notoriety because, by the way, this is my name. And if you want to email me, I invite anybody to email me. First name, last name at yahoo.com. Yahoo. And you say my name, Jean Broida. Broida. It's a tough last name. It's difficult. Just remember the name of the book, Unknown Objects, the top 10 U.S. UFO cases. So what are those? We start with the Foo Fighters. We go to that's right after World War II. So really the modern history in the United States of UFOs goes back to post-World War II. And by chapter 3, we're up to Roswell. Before that was the Kenneth Arnold sighting, really interesting, around Mount Rainier. And we get on to Betty and Barney Hill, the first mass publicized abduction case that was published against the couple's will. Really? 4 years after the event happened. Lots of little interesting factoids about cases that among UFO researchers, these are well known, and we love to tell these stories. It's like kids at a camp out around the campfire or at bedtime. You want to hear the same stories over and over and over. We love these stories. They're familiar to us, but to people who aren't of our culture, who aren't of our group, who might be more interested in ghosts or Bigfoot than UFOs, and that's all valid within the umbrella of paranormal research and interest. We don't necessarily know the same stories. And so that's why it's nice to intermix on shows like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the last chapter in my book is the mass sighting that happened in Phoenix, Arizona, 1987. Even the governor of Arizona weighed in on this. He first admitted that they flew right over his house. There was a massive one, and there are actually 2 events that I chronicle in my book, 2 different sightings or sets of sightings. One was of this massive UFO, massive, blotted out the stars. Seriously. And the thing you have to know about Phoenix is that Phoenix is surrounded by mountains. Yeah. And so certain neighborhoods, and I needn't add any more adjectives than that, but you might imagine what kind of neighborhoods would be up on the heights, overlooking everybody in the metropolitan area. So those people, including the governor, live up on the hill. Doctors, lawyers live up on the mountaintop, and they're right up there where this thing blots out the sky. They described it as we could almost reach. One of them reached up like she could touch it. It seemed that close. It wasn't that close. They couldn't gauge how big it was, only that it blotted out basically this much of the sky. If you can see my hands, this much, most of it. And it passed very slowly and deliberately overhead, and then the stars reappeared. It was gone. So meanwhile, west of Phoenix proper, this was reported as far west as almost Las Vegas. Things were happening out there in the desert. Sightings of what the military called flares. So basically lots of lights, lots of sightings of lights, people pulling over at the side of the road going, look at those lights. Wonder what those are, that sort of thing. So it was a completely different phenomenon from what was going on in Phoenix proper downtown. And what was going on in Phoenix proper, this one massive UFO, was also reported by none other than legendary screen star Russell, first name, who flies a plane. I'm just having a total brain fart. Goldie Hawn's husband. Goldie Hawn's husband.
Oh, Russell. I can see his face.
I know, right? And he starred in
Disney
Stargate.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
I do. I have the name.
The name will come to me, and I wrote him up in my book too. It's just shameful I can't remember, but hey, it's after a day of work. Kurt Russell, thank you so much. I knew one of us would get it. Kurt Russell was flying with his adult son in Kurt's private jet or plane.
And they saw
plane. I don't know that it was a jet. And as they came into Sky Harbor Airport, which is Phoenix, the big airport in Phoenix, they came into Sky Harbor, and it was the son who noticed first a light that shouldn't ought to be there in the sky. And he said, Dad, I think that light shouldn't ought to be there. And Kurt looked and said, you're right. I don't think that light ought to be there. So, I'm paraphrasing here. And I'm using some Kentucky colloquial because that's where I grew up. So that he radioed Sky Harbor Terminal, and he said, the tower, he said, there's a light where we don't think there should be one. And the tower confirmed, indeed, we also see that light, and other people are reporting that light, but we don't have visual radar on that light. So proceed with caution, but proceed, basically. So they landed without incident, and they both forgot about the incident until literally like 10 years later, maybe. Kurt walks in while Goldie at home is watching television, and she's watching one of these probably History Channel UFO shows, a documentary on UFO shows, on UFOs. And they are happening, and he's listening with half an ear. He's standing in the doorway, looking in with interest. And he's thinking not much of it until they're talking about the Phoenix Lights event specifically. And they mention I think they're called call numbers or ID numbers on the tail of the plane. And he recognizes his plane's numbers, letters and numbers. It would be like knowing your vehicle ID if you had to.
License plate. Yeah.
Like if you use valet a lot, you need to to identify your car by its license plate. So every day, it's something you would just know as a pilot. Okay. Yeah. He just recognizes. And when he hears the idea of his plane, he remembers, after years of not remembering this, he remembers instantly being in the plane with his son, seeing the light, the emotional impact they had, which was wonderment, and maybe a little concern. The modern narrative the modern Pentagon, an official narrative, talks a lot about airspace threat. These things these UFOs pose an airspace threat, and that impacts national security. Especially, so therefore, we have to be cloaked in secrecy more. But Kurt Russell said, when I remembered being in the plane, I also remembered this forgetting of the incident, and that's a hallmark of UFO sightings. You experience it, and it's shocking. It's upsetting because it's a disconnect with the reality that it's not part of your official narrative anymore. It's something unexplained, genuinely unexplained. But at the time when he saw it, late 1980s, 1987 specifically, at the time he saw it, the U.S. government was still running its official cover-up story, pejorative cover-up story. You must be crazy to believe in UFOs. Deny, discredit, and redirect attention. Okay,
Yes.
so you're crazy. You didn't see it. It's gaslighting. We now know it is gaslighting, and it was gaslighting taken to perfection because let's remember, the CIA, which ran most of these black ops in terms of the propaganda campaign to convince people they were crazy to believe in UFOs. They had first in the 1950s, after World War II, millions of dollars of budget that was unaccountable. Unaccountable means in government terms, in government contracting terms and business terms, it means not that they didn't do accounting. They did their own accounting, but their accounting was not transparent, didn't have to be transparent to the taxpayer paying for the funding. Okay, so from the get-go, the taxpayers, we the people, were kept in the dark about what these black ops were spending money on.
Mm-hmm.
So at first the budgets were in millions, then they became billions of dollars. And so when you get into billions of dollars annual budget, think of all the people that you could employ to be agents of the CIA, to do analysis, to spread propaganda. I was in basically mass large group concert-like events, or art-type events, art fairs, something along that line. Non-political, but free speech, free assembly types of environments where there were definitely, incontrovertibly, without a question in my mind, CIA operatives seated into the crowd to create dissent and to quell dissent. It was interesting. They had two purposes. They halted they halted anything against the mainstream narrative through doubt. They were doubting Thomases, very vocal doubting Thomases, when no one else had much of an opinion. They were very much in your face doubting Thomases. When you tried to say something through free speech and express an opinion, they would challenge it because it contradicted the official narrative. And then they would put forward their own version of the official narrative and basically challenged anyone to disagree with it.
Trying to cause confusion.
For fear of more ridicule, shame, and derision. They came in with negative emotion to propel their propagandic message, which is still going on, of course. It's one of the main ways to work propaganda effectively. You have to play on emotions because it's not reasonable. Propaganda is by its very nature unreasonable. It's a lie, so therefore it's unreasonable and also false. It's a false narrative. So Pentagon did a reverse face in 2020, and then in 2022, under the new Defense Act, formed these new groups. And we have a new language. We have new committees who pretend they know nothing about the decades of research that went before.
Yep. They changed UFO to UAP because they termed it skunked. And what they mean by skunked is everybody used it for anything in the sky. So they changed it so that they can redirect the attention to what they want it on.
Of course. And thank you, Lisa, for shouting out Kurt Russell. It's Kurt, by the way. Kurt was you're thinking of Spartacus, I think. Kurt Russell. Boy, he's a great actor too. Anywho, back to the topic. Lights in the sky. Lights in the sky. Where did they come from?
Yeah. I actually had an experience myself.
Oh.
A couple of them, actually. We were at a friend's 4th of July party. It was daylight. We were all in the backyard. And we all looked up at about the same time, which is odd because we were in conversation and we just all looked up. And there was this light moving way too fast, and then it stopped. I don't mean it slowed down. I mean, it went right above Wymore, right here. And then went, and then went, and was gone. That was my second one. My first one, I was out looking for a new hunting spot. Middle of the afternoon, I had my Mountain Dew. Wasn't drinking. I was driving, had my pop. Driving in my truck. We have manuals of maps for public land access where you can go on public lands and hunt. So I'm looking for a new hunting spot. And driving down this gravel road, my radio starts cutting out. My truck starts cutting out. Next thing I know, an hour later, I'm sitting at a stop sign on a different gravel road 10 miles from where I was, with no memory of how I got there, with my foot on the brake, truck running in gear. Have no idea. Interesting what happened.
You have no idea what happened during your missing time?
No clue. No clue.
Have you considered hypnotic regression, or is it even of any interest to you?
It would be of interest to me because I would like to know why something is in my thumb now.
Well,
I have x-rays to prove it. I can send you the x-rays. After that, I got in a fight. I broke my hand. And I said it myself, but the wife at the time made me go in and get an x-ray anyway. Doctor's like, why are you here? It's perfect. I'm like, thank you.
Good cover. Good
But
cover.
then it's like,
It's awkward to go into the doctor's office and say, I want an x-ray because I have an alien implant in my hand. Or I think
I didn't know.
Alien implant. No,
Yeah.
but even if you suspected it, you can't go into a doctor's office and say, hey, give me an MRI because I think aliens implanted something in my hand while I was sleeping.
And
insurance doesn't cover that. Sorry.
No, it doesn't. But when it happened, I didn't know if maybe I had a medical issue or something, which might have caused that, but that doesn't explain the truck. I mean, I overthought the heck out of it. But then, I got in a fight. I busted my hand. Wasn't my choice to get in a fight. Said it. She made me go get x-rays. And the doctor's like, oh, yeah, by the way, there's this thing in your thumb. I can tell you what it isn't. It's not bone. It's not plastic. It's not steel. It's not wood. I can't tell you what it is, though. No insertion. No nothing. No marks. It's just right about there.
Well, there was a surgeon. I wrote on him several years ago. His name might pop into my head. I've done a lot of research. Just a little bit about me, by the way. I am basically lifelong UFO researcher and paranormalist. I'm a mystic, but I'm also a scientist with skepticism. Don't believe everything that I encounter.
Right.
But I know that the U.S. government has been lying about the reality of UFOs my entire life, and I'm clearly not that young. And I object to that. I object to that on constitutional grounds, basically. I'm a patriot, so
thank you for that.
To be lied to and then said, oh, it wasn't a lie, but we're not going to apologize or retract. I think that's really adding insult to injury, and I'm not going to belabor that point because I'm mature, right? But your experience is not unheard of. It's not, in fact, even atypical in UFO circles. People are abducted and they get implants, and the material is not terrestrial. This one doctor did 12 surgeries, 2 on one person.
Read about that.
11 patients, and he extracted implants from each one. They had no conscious knowledge of having, in other words, they hadn't been tagged for any other reason, right? Yeah. There was no explanation for these things to be there. As the doctor was trying to remove these implants, he has video showing these objects moving away from the surgical tool.
Yes.
Moving away as if it has consciousness, or at least some sort of sensor that detects proximity, something being near it, and moves away, whether it's programmatical or biological.
Right.
I mean, the line thins. That's really where we're going with AI, artificial intelligence, that thinning of biological response to machine response, whatever it was. This thing moved away. It didn't want to be extracted. And when he got to grab a hold of it with the tool, he's extracting it, and it's already had tissue, native tissue, in wrapping around it. It's embedded into native tissue, and so it's being very difficult to extract.
Mm-hmm.
It's resisting every way it can to be extracted from the host. Yes. And when it is ultimately extracted, it's not big. It's very small. put into a piece of fish, you can really get a look at it. And they start teasing apart, getting the tissues off of it. It's clearly mechanical. It's clearly manufactured. I think they even may have found serial numbers. Very, at this point, you get your electron microscope out.
Yeah.
For very close viewing, and they're seeing now whether these reports are true or not. Right, that's debatable. That's where the skeptical comes in. But these are the reports. Yeah. These are the reports that have come in from more than one source. That this is what's going on. Someone is manufacturing these things, putting them into us or some of us, and then putting us back into the herd of people. Yes. And then doing what? We don't know. Monitoring, directing, we don't know. What do you think, Keith? Has your behavior been affected or your consciousness been affected since that event where you noticed the implant?
Not at that time. Later for a different, complete reason. But at that time, no. But I also had something else with me, we'll say, that modified my thought patterns and behavior patterns and speech patterns and hearing patterns. I found out I was possessed since I was 6 until about 5 years ago. So that plays into a lot. What I want to know is why they put this in here. Who put it in here? Is it man-made? Was it actually from up there? That doctor also, I believe, found pieces of meteorite in people. Now, if a piece of meteorite comes down and hits your hand, you're going to know it. It's hot from going through the atmosphere, and it's probably going fast enough to go right through your hand. So how would a piece of meteorite get embedded into your hand or your neck or wherever? I got questions. I'm going to.
So I got the name of the doctor, Dr. Roger Leir.
Yes.
Roger, Leir. I wrote about him. UFO abductions, fact or fiction. Dr. Roger K. Leir, the alien implant doctor.
Yeah. Now, I believe he's passed away, hasn't he?
Leir. I think he may have passed away.
Yeah, because
of course the naysayers cast aspersions on his work. But sure. He collaborated with Dr. Stephen Greer, another lifelong or decades-long researcher into UFO phenomenon, and an advocate for transparency, an advocate for true UFO disclosure, which we're still not seeing.
We almost did.
Seeing a new version of the truth.
We almost did. The last holder of a very high office was about ready to disclose a lot of information when somebody else took his seat. You know what I'm saying there. And hopefully that previous high office holder is going to get his seat back at the table, and we might get the information we want.
Well, we might, but I'm not holding my breath from the government because we, the citizen scientists, have already uncovered plenty of truths in the UFO research community. And we're happy to share, we're happy to gush what we know to anyone who will sit still long enough to listen to and not run away. Like any presenter, we crave an audience. So I certainly welcome questions from the audience here. I see Howie Odell has joined us too. Hi, Howie.
Odell himself.
People that we know and love.
Founder of the RNN network.
I hope everybody had a splendid Thanksgiving also. And that despite the hardships of modern times, all of us can find some blessings to count. That's my wish for everyone here.
Absolutely.
And if you find yourself in dark despair, some advice that I've put to good use myself is it's easy and it's tempting and it feels good to dwell on self, but to get out of yourself, to get out of your own head and your own head space, it can be very helpful to help others to think about how, even in your own small way, whether that other is a person or a creature, an animal, even a spirit, a disembodied entity, depending on your circumstances, it really can help uplift, which is part of my job as a light worker, to uplift consciousness.
Yes.
Just get out of your own head for a while and do stuff like this. This gets me out of my head.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
Digging it.
Missed you.
Yeah. You're my peeps.
What your opinion not the internet's opinion or research's opinion. For you, what would be the number one UFO, UAP sighting that you're aware of? What's your favorite? What's your favorite?
Boy, that's tough. That is a tough question. What I was going to say was that your case, Keith, up to the alien, well, maybe even including the alien implant part, was sounding a lot like Travis Walton. Again, I covered Travis in one of the chapters of my book. Every chapter, by the way, tells the story, talks about the observer or observers and how credible they were, right?
Yeah.
And then was there media coverage of this story? And if so, did the media take a side, a side pro or con, or was it objective reporting, right? And then, in my opinion, why is the story important enough to be in the top 10 book?
Yeah.
And then a final conclusion section where I wrap up basically the subtext of what I think was going on behind the scenes of this story. Okay. Because we have the story and then we have the behind the scenes of the story, which has always interested me as a journalist. The politics behind storytelling.
Yeah.
Vis-a-vis the official narrative, which supports the big lie that UFOs are not real, they don't exist, and you must be crazy to believe in them. So what happened to Travis Walton? One of the later chapters in my book, we're getting closer now to the Phoenix Lights mass sighting, okay? Yeah. So what happened to Travis Walton? Are you familiar with the case?
A little bit.
Okay, so in a nutshell, he was out logging with fellow foresters. They were driving home from a good day's work in the setting sun. They were chatting in the pickup truck that was driven by their boss, the crew lead.
Okay.
And I believe it was 6 of them in the truck. I get the number confused because there was a movie made about this, Fire in the Sky is the name of that movie. And they miscounted the number of guys. So either there were 6 and the movie showed 7, or there were 7 and the movie showed 6. But he was one of 6 or 7 guys. And they're driving along and they're chattering. And they are detoxing after a day of work, being very physical, very active. Logging is what we would call it. And they worked under a contract in a very secluded region in Arizona. And so they're driving home, and all of a sudden, Travis and another guy notice a light in the sky. And Travis has been noticing it sort of subconsciously in his peripheral view. It's off outside the window, off to his side. And he thinks it's the sun setting. It's the sun setting. But then he realizes, no, the sun has set a long time ago. It should be pitch black or a little moonlight. And it's not. This isn't that effect. And so the crew lead pulls over. He stops the truck in the direction of this light. And so they look and they see a craft. They see a light, and then they see a craft as well, a physical object hovering over the ground, and it isn't very far away to the clearing of the forest. So Travis, as by his own accounts, gets out of the truck to get a closer look. And he's crouching down, and he's like a hunter, perhaps, creeping forward, sort of bush to shrub to fallen log, until he finally gets behind a fallen log. These are big trees, by the way, so there's plenty of cover. But he feels vulnerable facing this craft, so he wants to be behind cover. This is an interesting aspect of the case. And he gets closer and closer and closer until finally he's so close, and his impulse is, I want to know everything about this thing. I want to go aboard. I want my curiosity satisfied. He doesn't feel any fear or threat. This is what's also interesting. And then a blue beam shoots out of the craft, knocks him backward. The guys in the truck report seeing Travis, who's been crouched down and watching, physically lifted by a blue beam and forced back 12 feet, where he lands on his back and shoulder. He's stunned by the impact of the fall.
Yeah.
They in the truck drive off in panic and leave him there until they get to the main blacktop road. They're off the logging roads, the dirt roads, and by the way, their progress has been very slow because the road is very rutted. and they have to stop a few times because the little pickup truck just can't do it. It's not an all-wheel drive. It's not a big mobile. It's just a pickup truck. And in the 1970s, I think this happened. So try to put yourself in that time frame. Every time they slow down and stop for ruts, the other 5 are talking about their fallen comrade. We left him behind. We're feeling remorse. They're kind of thinking like Marines, where no one's left behind.
Maybe
not that any of these guys were Marines necessarily. I don't think any of them were, but they had this sentiment, like Cub Scouts, even, or Boy Scouts. Any group of people might feel camaraderie. These guys work together. They go for beers after work together. They're all from the same little town, Snowflake, Arizona, or nearby. They know each other. They know each other's families. A couple of them on the team were brothers. So there's a small town influence that has to do with this narrative. They're talking as they leave Travis behind. Maybe we shouldn't have left him behind. And by the time they get to the Blacktop Road, the crew lead says, well, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I'm going back for Travis. If you're afraid to go back, you can stay here and I'll pick you up when I come back with Travis. Yeah. And so the others in the truck consider being left on the road alone without the protection of even a truck, standing out there in the open in the dark with a UFO in the neighborhood, at least one UFO in the neighborhood. They just saw it. And they're like, no, we'll stay in the truck. We'll go back. So they all go back. When they go back, Travis is gone. So Travis is gone. The guys in the truck return to Snowflake. They return home. And they call it into the sheriff's office immediately. And they say with conviction that this is what happened. A UFO appeared, knocked Travis out. We left the scene. When we got back, he was gone.
Yep.
The next morning, a search party went out, organized by the sheriff's department. They could not find Travis. And so now, after a couple of days of searching, no Travis. Pretty clearly, no Travis. The I'm going to say survivors, the guys in the truck, were immediately suspected of murder or foul play. They had done something to Travis. This was not anything of their story. And they all submitted to lie detector tests, which proved they were telling the truth, or at least not lying. Okay, so 5 days later, Travis shows up again at the side of the road, miles from where he had been abducted, but on the way home. On the way the pickup truck had passed that fateful night when he disappeared. Travis had been redeposited in the vicinity of where he had been abducted and close enough to Snowflake, Arizona, that he could walk back into town despite his dazed condition. He walked into town. He walked over 2 bridges to get into the central enough part of town that had banks of payphones. Yes, we had them in those days.
Yes.
He stumbled into a parking lot that had payphones in it. He found a payphone. He managed to get, he had a dime or a quarter, whatever it required in the day. He phoned his brother-in-law, who answered and said, this can't be Walton. Walton is gone. After 5 days of basically mainstream propaganda saying that Travis had been disposed of and was no longer living, Travis shows up living. Meanwhile, there had been prank callers pretending to be Travis or know about Travis, and the whole family had suffered this indignity of prank calls. And so when the real Travis calls, and it doesn't sound like Travis anymore, he's sounding like a battered Travis, out of his mind Travis, shocked, PSTD Travis, okay? He's talking to a relative of his who's saying, you're not the real Travis. He's saying, I am the real Travis. And he gives him enough information that he establishes his identity. He gets picked up by relatives. He gets taken home. And the next day they start to put all this reality back together, including getting the other guys off the hook. Yeah. But then Travis comes forward and gives his side of the story. And you can read all about it in my book. He was by his own account, he was abducted by aliens. He resisted them physically. He roamed around the ship. He went into down a ramp or some situation where he went from an enclosed area that was very stifling and hot and humid to an open space area that was more like an airplane or aircraft or spaceship hangar. He saw other craft. He has a very detailed account of very much what happened to him. And in later years, more recently, in the last 5 years, he has shifted his narrative to realize that after these beings knocked him out, it was an accident, and they brought him on the ship to repair him.
See, I was going to ask about that.
Repair him and restore him in reasonably good health, where he could recover. They knocked him dead. It was an accident, and they put it back together.
Yeah.
They made it right.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that. I really wondered about that, and that actually answers a question I had.
Yeah, there's this commonality of experience. It's an interesting. It's threading. It's a woven tapestry, really, of individual threads, such as yours.
Yeah.
You don't even have an individual thread. You have two strands. You had two episodes, right?
Yeah.
And I'd say to you, I put it to you and anyone else who's had a sighting in their life that they can remember, that you've probably been abducted, not once, but multiple times. And if you've been abducted, probably everyone in your family has been abducted, because the creatures doing the abduction seem to be interested in genetics, in genetic relationship. And so they want to see something that has to do with families that is mirrored, believe it or not, in the book of Genesis of the Bible and other ancient scriptures texts that talk about lineages. Who was the forefather? Who was the progenitor of a clan, of a race, of a strain of human beings? Why would that be important to anyone but a geneticist? What are they doing? They're doing genetic studies. Of what kind and to what end, they won't say.
Yeah.
They never say.
Are they studying where they probably, and this is my opinion, spliced into our DNA gene, and all of a sudden, there's physical evidence of a gene splice in our DNA, but nobody can say who did it, how it happened. I mean, it's pretty major.
That's major.
Right. It's right there.
It is right there.
And
It's
all of a sudden,
incontrovertible.
here's Homo sapiens.
You talk about an implant that has material that's not of the earth. We have part of every person, every human being has a part of our DNA, not a whole strand, but a patch, basically, an insertion that is not found in any other animal or plant on Earth. What do you make of it?
It goes along with the story of Enki and Enlil.
It does. It's amazing how they track.
And that the quick version of it, two brothers, quote, gods, who wanted slaves to mine gold for their planet to save the planet. Okay. Lizard. They look like lizard people. Okay.
I haven't heard that part of it. I heard they were very human-like. But carry on. The Anunnaki, and they came from Nibiru.
Yes,
just to set their home planet Nibiru was failing. Its atmosphere was failing, and they needed to mine gold. And Earth happens to be gold rich.
Yes, it does. So they came down here, and they needed a race of slaves.
They brought a race with them, the Igigi.
Okay.
The Igigi revolted. The Igigi were biologically prepared to work in mines, but because they had pale skin, they were short of stature, they were very weak, they were flaccid, we would say. They're waxy kind of creatures.
Okay.
And they were suffering from the gravity of Earth, the magnetism, the electromagnetism of Earth, but more importantly, they were suffering from the hot African sun, the conditions that exist in the mines of South Africa. So the Anunnaki arrived, they built spaceports in the Sinai, the modern day Sinai. They built spaceports, that's where we find Göbekli Tepe,
yes.
pot-bellied hill or pot-shaped hill that is a story all of its own. But in the south, where the mining was going on, there's plenty of evidence of ancient archaeological gold mines, and some of these mines exist to the present day, but they're very rich mines. And so the mining was down in the south. The Igigi said, we're fine. Basically, I think they were saying we're fine in the mine, but we have to come out at some point. When we come out, we're in the searing African sun. And unless we get into a temple that can protect us from the hot searing sun, we're kind of stuck. Yeah. And they got to the point where they said, we're not going to work anymore. They went on strike. Mm-hmm. And the Anunnaki killed them all. And so that's when they had to appeal, the two half-brothers, who, by the way, Enki and Enlil were half-brothers. Same father, different mothers.
Okay.
They were each, interestingly enough, married to the same woman, who was the chief biogeneticist on this, in this entourage, in this cast of characters that's well documented in the Sumerian texts. Okay, this is going back to ancient Sumeria, the first civilization we have documentation on, writing on. Okay, so the half-brothers went back to Dad on the home planet Nibiru. Dad's name is or Anu, which is the Egyptian sun god's name. Coincidence? I think not. So Daddy Anu back on Nibiru has to say yay or nay to bioengineering humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, from Homo sapiens something else, or Neanderthal, or whatever it ended up being. So they got clearance to do this on Earth, to do this bioengineering. And so what's interesting is that the Egyptian tableaus are thought to represent this very long and drawn out process of perfecting the recipe, basically, to bioengineer a human. And the ultimate recipe did involve this gene splice, or whatever you would call it, this gene addition, gene insertion. They inserted a portion of themselves into us, which is very interesting from a human origin point of view. That's one of my main themes in life, is understanding where human beings actually came from. And we actually came from bioengineering of the Anunnaki to slave gold for them in the hot African sun. And those were Negroes in Africa. That specific type of Homo sapiens sapiens were Negroids in Africa. At the same time, apparently the Anunnaki, or perhaps different races, were seeding the other 4 root races around the earth. Not necessarily at the same time, but we have the Asians, we have Native Americans, we have Caucasians, we have anthropologists, at least, mainstream anthropologists, identify 5 main root races. I'm not being racist, I'm just saying what anthropology says. And that Black Africans came from the cradle of civilization, the Tigris and Euphrates, that's up in the Sinai, but actually it starts kind of in the gold mine area and flows northward toward the Mediterranean Sea. Well, and it may not be exactly the Mediterranean Sea. There's other seas in the way, the Dead Sea, the Red Sea. There's all kinds of seas up there. That's not my specialty. The Middle East is not my specialty. But I do know that I know a lot about the Anunnaki and this whole story, that they got permission to bioengineer humans, and that's why we're here. And what do we do to this day? We slave for gold, or its representation, which has devolved into fiat currency, paper. Which is not even backed by metal, gold, or silver. This is how our civilization is devolving from what the Anunnaki had set up in the first place, which was basically institutionalized slavery for their own purposes. And they said when they left, the bulk of them left for reasons that I don't fully understand. Someone may. But they left, and when they left, they said, we'll be back. And this, of course, is a hallmark of most messianic prophecy. We'll be back. I'll be back.
Yes.
We're coming back. And I just picked up this book yesterday by one of my idols. I got to read it forwards. It's backwards to me. Zecharia Sitchin. Zecharia Sitchin cracked the code of the Sumerian language. He's attributed with this, and he wasn't particularly a linguist that I know of. It came to him. The solutions, the linguistic solutions. He was engrossed in these he collected the carvings and tableaus. There'll be pictures in this book of it. This is the 7th book of a 7-book series, the last of a 7-book series. And this is the one that really interests me because it's talking about the end times. That which is discussed in Revelation in the Bible. So we're talking about the prophecies of Daniel. And I'm no Bible scholar, but as a skeptical researcher, I want to inform myself on any valid source I can get. And the Bible is one of them. Okay. So Sitchin is drawing on ancient Sumerian text, Egyptian text, any text basically that's relevant up to modern times, and I can't wait to read this, because he starts out in the introduction saying the question on people's minds, the people who study the Anunnaki, when are they coming back? When will they return? And Christians say the same, speak in the same terms of Jesus Christ. When will he return? And the Muslims speak in the same terms about Muhammad. When will he return? And anyone who has this so-called messianic paradigm, religious paradigm, spiritual paradigm, or historical paradigm, in my case, mine is an historical paradigm based on Sumerian chronicling. These Anunnaki, who were real physical beings, said when they left in bulk, we'll be back. Well, when? When are they coming back? We all want to know. And furthermore, did they all leave? Because another main question to ufologists, people who study UFOs, is, well, if there's, if the Anunnaki came, or if there's so many aliens, where are they? Well, I put to you, they're here. They have been here. They will be here. They're not going away. They're here among us, and they help guide politics, apparently. They help steering politics, steering science. Goodness knows what else they might be involved in. But some of them never left. They flit about. They come and go. We can't control them. Therefore, our government perceives them as a threat, even though they typically don't do anything. They don't do anything any more threatening. I put it to you that the ETs don't do anything any more threatening that our terrestrial, meaning of Earth, our fellow researchers, scientists do when they're tagging animals in the wild. Zoologists are trying to study migratory habits of bears or some species of animal. So they capture them. They abduct them out of the wild where they live, and then they put an implant on them. They put a tag on them with a radio transceiver. And for all we know, this transceiver is emitting a very high-pitched frequency that's annoying this animal all the time. We don't know. Just because we can't hear it or sense it doesn't mean that they can't. And I'm speaking off the top of my head. I'm just saying that the whole scientific attitude on Earth is of pretty much disregard of the species being studied. Not to say that everyone is cruel and unkind-hearted when they deal with animals. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that we take it for granted as humans that we basically have the right to abduct and experiment on animals, even if we consider the procedure to be non-invasive. When you tag an animal, when you microchip an animal, that to me is invasive.
It's invasive.
That is now non-native technology. And some human being has decided to justify it in the name of science. Well, why then couldn't ETs do the same with human beings?
Right. And you just hit on something that was like, holy crap.
It's a holy crap moment, folks.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers.
My favorite. I love those holy crap moments.
When that happened to me is about the time that my ears started ringing. They ring all the time, 24/7. The pitch will raise, it will lower, depending on Spirit's message. Like if I'm helping on a case, if I'm dealing with something negative, that pitch will go down. If I'm dealing with something positive, that pitch will go up. I can use the pitch to understand how to deal with something. I use it as a tool sometimes. It's also when Spirit speaks to me, I can.
That frequency shifts?
Yes, it shifts. So is Spirit speaking to me, or are they speaking to me? Hey, dumbass.
Or are they intertwined somehow?
Correct.
I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
But I rely a lot on my intuition. In my opinion, I have highly intuitive faculties, which probably sounds arrogant, but because it's entirely subjective, how do I know what I feel? We're getting Descartesian at this point, right? I am because I think I am, that kind of thing. I don't want to go there, but I think we're touching on a lot of great points here, actually, that they're among us, they're scrutinizing us. We don't know why. They do what they want. They do what they want, like Cartman on South Park.
Absolutely. And one thing I wondered
and they're violating our human rights.
One thing I wondered is how they did the gene splicing, because modern day scientists, you actually use viruses in order to insert DNA into cells. So
I would think they're more clever than that, because we see it in our DNA. I mean, they may have used a virus I just think I think one tendency humans have is to interpret alien behavior. That's really all we can judge is their behavior. We don't know their intentions. Even when they talk to us or communicate with us, we don't know that they're telling the truth. All right.
Yeah, different races can have different motives.
So all that said, we can only really look at what they do. And their disposition seems to be either neutral, positive, or negative towards human beings.
Even in the same species, like Enki and Enlil, the two half brothers. From what I read, one wanted to enslave, one wanted to give us knowledge.
Right, liberate us through the consciousness about that DNA strand, actually.
Yes, if you think about it, the Garden of Eden, the serpent.
That's my theory, actually. I was probably write a book about that at some point, that it's metaphorical for the snake represents the brother who is pro-human. I get their names mixed up. But basically, the way I think of it, and I'm not a Christian, I'm a pagan, but the easiest way for me to think about it, and there are authors who have done these correspondences between the Sumerian names and Christian names or Muslim names or any other names, Aramaic names, Babylonian names. There's all these correspondences, I think is the term for that, correspondences. So the easy way for me to think of it, even though I'm not a Christian, Garden of Eden, okay, the snake. The snake approaches Adam first, the man. First, it's important to understand, the way I interpret this is that all entities in all the universes exist in the state of godness, godhood. There is God. The nature of God is love and light. Okay, that said, we have gods with a lowercase g. And those would be people like Anunnaki who show up on a planet that's relatively primitive. One of the science fiction writers said that when any civilization shows up on another planet with technology sufficiently advanced, that technology will be regarded as magic.
Godlike.
Okay, because the natives can't understand it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened was from Nibiru, the spaceship Heaven was dispatched. And so Heaven got to Earth with the two brothers and their wife and a complement of crew, very much like Star Trek or Star Wars would have your military officers, your science officers and crew, and then security. Those are the main branches on any ship like this. That in this case has a mission of mining gold. Okay, and while you're at it, explore while you're at it, but focus on getting that gold. It's imperative you get that gold. Okay,
shave the top of mountains off.
Yeah, they made human beings, and human beings started mining gold, and both the head biologist, the woman, and her. Okay, so she's married to both of these guys, but she likes the pro-human guy better, and so. Getting back to the Christian analogy, they sail forth to Earth, they transport themselves on the spaceship Heaven. The commander of the ship is Jehovah. And one of his principal officers is Lucifer, the bringer of light. That's what that name means. I'm not talking about Satan. I'm talking about Lucifer in the biblical account. His name is the bringer of light. It doesn't mean anything evil. It means the bringer of light. What was that light? That light was the consciousness imparted to human beings that we have a divine element. We call it a divine element. We have an element that's introduced into our genes by splice that no other animal on the planet has, such that we can close our eyes, go within, go through the pineal chakra, and communicate with our higher godhood, which is attached to the Akashic record and all of consciousness, basically.
Yes.
That we have that capability as humans. It's not clear that ants can do that, or even that porpoises can do that. I don't know that they can or can't, or that anyone has even studied it. That's a question about consciousness. Yes. But it's for sure that these brothers disagreed on this point.
Yes, they did.
And they disagreed to the point where Jehovah, commander of the ship, said, Lucifer, You've irritated me for the last time. You defied me by going onto earth, tempting Adam with this forbidden knowledge, that fruit of the knowledge of forbidden, the fruit of the tree of forbidden knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil. What does this really mean? This is very high metaphor and symbolism. But when you think of this in terms of ETs coming to Earth on a ship with a hierarchy, and the commander of the ship says to a high-ranking officer, Lucifer, you've basically done mutiny. You have been subordinate. You've been so subordinate. I'm stripping you of your rank. I'm taking your communicator and I'm putting you onto the earth with the 199 people who followed you in this folly, this insurrection. You're going to go down on earth, and the Bible says that they will suffer their length of days. They're not on the artificial environment of the ship anymore, imitating the environment of Nibiru. These buildings natively live to be 2,000-3,000 years old. Okay, their age span is 2,000-3,000 years. Can you wrap your head around it?
Humans, so were the Sumerian kings.
Yes, and so the first interbreeding, they had very long lives, and then as they interbred with more humans, age span reduced genetically. Yes. This is also very interesting. It's also well documented. So the two brothers squabbled. Lucifer and his 199 other fallen angels, they weren't fallen, they were ejected, they were transported. Talk about transported angels. They were transported onto the face of the earth to live amongst humans, for heaven's sakes, the beasts of the field almost. Ooh, to have to suffer that indignity. You enlightened this creation that you helped create. Now you have to go live with them. And while you're at it, I mean, they're there. They have free reign. They have free will. They start taking amongst them wives, human wives. And now we have Genesis.
And we have the Nephilim, the Watchers.
Cain and Abel. We have Sophia written out of the Bible. And another character who was on the scene, a half-sister. There's all these characters, humans that were at the time of the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
Who got cast out, who got to stay. There's more to the story than meets the eye.
Oh, yeah.
But it's been grossly simplified, in my opinion, by Christian doctrine, by preachers. Basically, I was
from this to this, and then as you go further, it goes down, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're living less than 100 years.
Right. We'll say Medusa lived 800 years or something like that. So by that time, they're being pretty well watered down, because before that, I'm trying to think of how long Abraham lived. These guys were living thousands of years.
Noah, I believe they say lived 300 years. Isn't that right? Or am I mistaken?
Or more.
Yeah.
Or more. You're right. The most ancient names lived very, very, very long lives. But as soon as they interbreed with humans, of course, that genetic mix, what's the word I want? Dilutes. It dilutes. Yes. The purity dilutes, which ties in with purity of race theories. Please don't hate me, but amongst the groups on Earth who support and practice purity of race, and I'm meaning no pejorative sense, I'm being very factual. Right. We have Jews interbreed, or at least Orthodox Jews interbreed. And if you go out, they have terms for people outside their faith, and they disparage people who wed outside their faith.
Yes.
Muslims, as I understand it, do similarly. Even sects of Christianity will say, if you're a Lutheran, you got to marry a Lutheran, or we really want you to marry a Lutheran, not a Presbyterian, and not a Catholic. And the Catholics have the same thing going. If you're a Catholic, you should marry a Catholic.
Yeah,
so there's all this, this really ties in not only purity of philosophy, but before that, purity of race. And I think all of us have racial intelligence. We remember our racial origins. We're maybe not in consciousness unless you work to develop that, which you can do. Any of us can do. But in our deep, deep subconscious minds, our not the reptilian brain, but above that, in the occipital part of the brain, in the back, that deep brain, the deep subconscious, we have memory. We have race memory. We have memory of the Anunnaki. We remembered laboring in the hot sun and how much that sucked. It really kind of sucks to be human. That's why there's theories about Earth being a hell planet for humans.
this is hell. And when our meat suit passes, our light body gets to go home.
To where maybe we could look beyond, if not nationalism, the need for war, where we could, and I don't mean to get into capitalism versus socialism. I'm just talking about if you were an ET and you looked upon the earth and saw not merely the division by nations, but how nations, and more appropriately, I'm just going to call it like what it is, the predominantly male leaders of nations on the earth perpetuate a state of war and strife. Now, there are some female leaders who do the same. There are some male leaders who promulgate peace, and women leaders who do likewise. But in the United States, at least, the peacemakers were summarily wiped out by the CIA. There, I said it. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the people that Ike Eisenhower warned about in his last speech before he left office as president of the United States, and that JFK alluded to in his secret society speech.
Yes.
JFK was assassinated. It's now coming out that it wasn't lone gunmen. It never was lone gunmen.
No,
I looked into this. Was the first conspiracy I examined with a philosophy teacher who was obsessed with it back in the 1970s. This is how far I've been conspiracy researching, and that was my first conspiracy. It was very clear from the Magruder film that there were 3 or 4 points of impact that took off the president's skull.
Yes.
And I'll leave it at that. So when you start to realize, and so after him, Martin Luther King, even Malcolm X, I'm talking about influential people in peace movements, whether they were Christian, Muslim, whatever, influential voices that talked about peace and unity. John Lennon, associated by a CIA assassin. I'm sure of it. I know. They gave this whole cover story about the guy and he was crazy and a lone gunman. No, it never washes. It's never a lone gunman. It's always a CIA operation that cost the taxpayer millions, if not billions, of dollars.
Yes. Yeah. And
sorry to say it. Sorry to live in such a nation, hoping to raise consciousness that we could do better.
Yeah. And a lot of the shooters claim mind control. I couldn't control myself. I don't remember what assassins. I did.
Right. That even Son of Sam. Yeah. I'm just kind of free associating, but yes. Yeah. And maybe it was on the flip side of that, crazy good inventors like Nikola Tesla, Edison talked about divine inspiration, giving them the ideas for their inventions.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So it kind of works both ways. The frequency, if you can tune your radio, if your body is a radio and you can attune yourself to the right frequency, you can pick up on these influences, whether they are angelic or demonic, meaning whether it actually is. I'm not discounting the existence of demons and angels. I totally believe there are both, but I also believe there are ETs of 3 kinds: pro-human, neutral human, anti-human.
Yeah.
And so if your divine source or your intuitive source, shall we say, and that intuitive source is coming through your Christ consciousness, your oversoul, whatever it is you call this ability to link your own subconscious mind to a higher power, that consciousness, the consciousness of a higher power. People can cultivate that talent. Some people have that ability more naturally than others, and we tend to call those people empaths or some other kind of ESP kind of person. Okay. So, by the way, getting back to my background, not only am I empathic and a mystic who does tarot readings, astrology, and and magic, actually white magic, I am a scientist with a master's degree of computer information systems and linguistic degrees in French and English and teaching. So I have a broad breadth of knowledge, and all knowledge interests me. I want to be inclusionary rather than divisive. And when I live in a governmental system that is inherently divisive and deceptive, that's when I become militant in my own small way, in my fervor to raise consciousness, to perceive the falsity of the reality that we are told is in fact true.
Yes.
Which is why I love a show like this, because all of us here are for that purpose.
Yes. And that's kind of one of the things that cheers.
We got to question authority. That's what Ben Franklin said. And
Yes.
I stand by some of the founding fathers, not all of them. I'm sorry there weren't any founding mothers, but there weren't. Women only got the right to vote in the United States in, what was it, 1920?
Yeah.
I mean, this is appalling. Some modern state, somebody was telling me conversationally, India maybe got the vote for women in 1987.
Yeah.
I mean, crazy. How is it that women can't vote, guys? And I don't mean any particular guys. I just mean I can understand backlash to that sort of thing. And I can understand racial oppression the same way. And if I went to Hawaii decades ago. I was the victim of reverse racism. I don't know that there can be such a thing as reverse racism, but basically in Hawaii as a white person, or haole, that was the Hawaiian term for a white person as a haole, I was treated with disrespect and prejudice by Native Hawaiians are actually a minority. Most of the people in the Hawaiian Islands are Japanese. They were brought there to farm cane sugar. So between the native Hawaiians, who keep themselves by and large, if they can, they want to be insular and preserve their culture, because the United States tried to strip it away from them after all, through martial law, through the Navy. Okay, there's a complicated little history in Hawaii. So I understood the roots of the racism that was projected onto me by Native Hawaiians, by Japanese in the majority, and by Samoans as well.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Samoans in the Hawaiian Islands. They're very unpleasant people when they don't like you. And they're big also physically and very strong. And they're rather uncivilized by Western standards.
Yes.
And they're not Western. So they don't live up to Western standards. They don't really care about Western standards, which is their right.
They don't care.
I'm not saying, just saying that being the victim of racism was an interesting position, and it changed my consciousness. So I'm grateful for that experience. And I try to be mindful now that I'm back in the mainland that I have way filters. I vastly filter my reality. My perception of my reality is just that. It's the perception of my reality. And that is heavily filtered by the way I was brought up, what I've read, what I've researched, who I've talked to, the experiences I've had. And that would be true of any one of us, right? We all share that uniqueness, while we all at the same time have the commonality of dwelling on the same planet and ultimately sharing the same air that we breathe. Yes,
we do. We do. It kind of goes back to the Garden of Eden.
Absolutely.
Lilith, Adam's first wife, would not bow down. She said, no, I ain't doing that. I'm out. So they made a new wife that would bow down and do whatever Adam said.
Well, it wasn't really that way. What happened was Lucifer came down, or one of his representatives. So to the modern times, there is a group called the snake cult. The snake cult are basically descendants of Lucifer and his minions. Okay. The people who wanted humans to be able to, basically they were the Lutherans of the ETs. The Lutherans under Martin Luther preached that they revolutionized the idea that the average person didn't need a Catholic priest to commune with God or pray to God, that every person could be their own priest basically and pray right to God. And that was heresy to the Catholic Church, which had a lock on the priesthood. Okay. You're threatening our power. So we can't have Lutheranism, right? But now we do. Okay. So back in the day, Lucifer takes on the guys. Metaphorically, he's a snake because he has hidden knowledge and he's sneaky. I don't know what exactly, but he approached Eve. He approached Adam first, and Adam said, no, I'm a company man. I won't betray Jehovah.
Right.
And so then the snake went to Eve, and Eve had this characteristic of female humans that every society portrays, and that quality is curiosity. Women are curious. Men are strong and loyal. Women are curious and crafty. So the snake went over to, just I'm speaking an analogy here. The snake went over to Eve and said, hey,
excuse me,
would you like to partake of this hidden knowledge of good and evil? Would you like to know what it is? And Eve said, oh yeah. You know I do. Why didn't you come to me first? Why'd you bother going to Adam? You knew he would say no. He's a company man. I'm your woman. I'm a free thinker. We saw what happened to Lilith. I'm your woman. I want that knowledge. Give me the apple, the metaphorical apples. He tells her, forget Jehovah. Jehovah isn't God. Jehovah said he was God with a big G. He's not God with a big G. He's a God with a little g. Yeah, he's got a lot of technology. He's got stuff, but he ain't the whole thing. He ain't the end all be all. And then because she violated Jehovah's command and listened to that snaky voice and got that hidden knowledge that she didn't need Jehovah anymore, basically, that's when everything went pear-shaped. And the whole experimental farm of Eden was upset. And the occupants, the guilty, sinful, I should say, sinful occupants. Now, as a pagan, I don't believe in sin, but the Bible says they were sinful and they were cast forth into the world. They suffered even more length of days, and they had no more of the love of God. And I mean, it just gets complicated from there. And it's all about hidden knowledge, which is, by its definition, occultism.
Yes.
Our world, the world of human societies, as we know it, is driven by occultism. And this is the thing that British researcher and former politician David Icke, I-C-K-E, it looks like icky, but it's pronounced Ike. David Icke has written volumes and volumes and given literally 12-hour-long presentations, multi-day, 8 to 12-hour-long presentations, where he stitches the narrative from the arrival of the Anunnaki, whom he names, through the Sumerian legends, through ancient Egypt, through Babylonia, through ancient Egypt, through ancient Greece, to Rome, to the west, to the east, everywhere, and how the reptilians, basically the blue bloods, have dominated global politics and are now making their move to globalize and just tie up with a bow and ensure the total dominion and slavery of all the other human beings. That's guys.
There's video going around, and I don't know if I don't have the tech to just look at a piece of video and see if it's been altered or not. Love to, but I don't. But there are pieces of video going around where our leaders, they're standing on stage, and all of a sudden their eyes morph into like a lizard-like eye, and then morph back.
I've seen that, but as a skeptic, I have to wonder if that wasn't digitally manipulated.
That's why
I would give more credence. I would give more credence to somebody like you, Keith, who came to me and said, I saw somebody whose eyes shifted from the idea is that from a round pupil, the eye goes to a vertical, right? Which is like a cat's eye has a vertical pupil, I believe. Mm-hmm. Right. So they're saying, or the eyelids don't close from the outside in. They appear to be lidded differently. The lids operate differently. If a person tells me that, because I'm highly empathic, and it's not to say I can't be fooled or I can't be suckered. I can be.
Yeah.
But when a narrative rings of truth and jives with my intuitive reality and with lots of other accounts that other people have told me, I will give that much more credence and weight than I would to some doctored photograph or possibly doctored photograph.
Yeah, absolutely. Lisa Lee.
That's how I roll. I believe people. And this is one thing I think is really wrong with modern science, especially the so-called interpretive sciences. And what I mean by that is we have hard sciences, the so-called STEM sciences, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But then we have interpretive sciences such as psychology, sociology, anthropology. These are what I call the subjective sciences, because they're built on theories that are based on, say, archaeological evidence. Mm-hmm. But empiricism, true empiricism, is pure fact. And you only really find pure fact in sciences that are based on mathematics.
Mathematics, yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
This is really, and that's a sacred science. Mathematics and the so-called Platonic solids, which are the basis of modern I should say Arabic mathematics. Okay, Arabic. The Arabs developed this. Again, back to the cradle of civilization, back to the Sinai, where the spaceports were. They developed the concept of zero. They had the concept of zero when the kings of Europe, the astrologers and astronomers of Europe, were still expressing themselves in Roman numerals, which has no zero.
No.
So you cannot do modern math without a zero. It's impossible.
It is.
You cannot do it.
And
And
math does not
so
lie.
when the Crusaders went to North Africa, went to the Sinai and environs, and talked with learned men, because they didn't have learned women, bigots. They talked to the learned men. Yeah, I'm going to call it what it is.
Yeah.
I have an axe to grind. I have many axes to grind, but just historically, this is what went down. They talked to the learned men, and the men said, "We got this way of doing math. You might want to consider, because we've built these great things. We've built domes. We've built the oculus, which is the eye, the architectural eye, a round window where architecturally it should be impossible to support this space.
Yes.
Architecturally, it should be impossible. But there's ways to get around it architecturally, but you can't do any of it in Roman numerals. So there was this huge paradigm shift in the West where the Gregorian calendar was upset. There was a Julian calendar I laugh because I presented on this decades ago. One of my earliest interests was calendars. Mm-hmm. Who invented calendars? What do calendars do? How come the Mayans have calendars that are different from ours?
Yeah.
And how are they different? And what are they counting?
Ours should be different.
They count phases of Venus, cycles of Venus. The Mayans and the Aztecs were counting Venus, the moon, the sun. They were counting all kinds of things that we weren't counting.
There should be 13 months. There's 13 moons, full moons in a year. There should be 13 months.
And there aren't, because we had a big-headed Caesar. We had a Julius Caesar who said, I want more days in July. The reason why certain months have more days than other months in the Gregorian calendar. No, the Gregorian calendar.
Yeah.
We had this catechism. How did it go? It was about evens and odds. A mnemonic device to remember which of the bloody months have 30 days and which have all the rest have 31. Remember that? 30 days hath November, April, May, and whatever it was. All the rest have 31, except February. Which has yet another exception.
28.
Why does February have 28 or 29 days?
Or 29 or 4 years.
Why are there all these strange rules for something that's supposed to be math-based? And the simple answer is that the universe does not operate as circles.
Right.
Planets do not operate in circular orbits. They are slightly elliptical. And that introduces a math error, basically, or a mathematical phenomenon. Okay.
Yeah.
So Julius said, I want more days in my month. I want more days in July. And to get them, I'm going to rob February. I'm not making this up. And so when Augustus came along and took over, Augustus said, well, Julian Schmulian, I want my own calendar. And there was a period in the Middle Ages that lost, I'm not making this up, 21 days when the society was transitioned by the church, by the king and the church. Everyone was forced to go from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, and they lost 21 days in so doing. And they did it because the date of Easter, which is defined by the vernal equinox, it's a lunar holiday that is defined by the the spring equinox. That is when the sun passes through the constellation Aries. Okay, that's how it's defined. These are all defined by math, by astronomy. Okay, the Julian calendar was so wrong. It was so off in its calibration, in its mathematical roundings, and by taking these months willy-nilly, basically. They had lost 21 days, that the celebration of Easter by the church had shifted 21 days later. And so they're not celebrating in March, April anymore. It's now getting into basically spring planting season. And they're freaking out. They're like, we got to fix this. So all the great brains, the great astronomer brains, basically the king said, I'll give prize money and notoriety to any astronomer who can fix this. So they came up with the Gregorian calendar and they adopted it. And so anybody who had a birthday that fell within that 21-day period in that certain year, which I could look up because I presented on it decades ago, it's historical fact. Anyone who had a birthday who fell within that period didn't celebrate a birthday that year. They were SOL. And if a debt fell within that period, what did you do about these everyday practical occurrences? You've just wiped out 21 days of the calendar.
Gone.
And people were very, very upset at the time, as you could understand.
Yeah.
It really messed with the people, the society. And so this is how important calendrics are. And this is why I paid particular attention to the end of the Maya long count. Back in, so the end of the Maya long count was a numerological date in the Gregorian calendar, not the Mayan calendar. But in our calendar, if we translate the calendar months to numbers, it happened in December. The way I remember it is that it was 12/21/12. The date in Gregorian was 12 December 21, the 21st of December in 2012, 12/21/12. That was the end of the Maya long count.
Yes, I think so.
And what were they counting? Well, a lot of people have advanced theories about what they were counting, but the one that resonates with me is that they were counting a very long cycle of some 3,000 years that counts our solar system's position relative to the galactic center.
Yes.
The revolution of our solar system around the galactic center in an elliptical orbit. And when it gets back to origin, there's a reset to the Mayan calendar, because the Mayan calendar Mayans or any Mayan scholar, no one ever said the Mayan calendar predicts the end of the world.
No.
No one who studied the Mayan calendar said that. People who didn't understand the Mayan calendar said that.
They said that.
They said it's the end of the world.
There's a 25,
but it wasn't the end of the world. It was the end of the cycle. And so what was happening? I can't remember the source I that gave me this, but I want to refine it because it's very important. It's terribly important that up to the point of 12/21/12, the solar system had been moving away from galactic center. So basically moving away would, and I'm just sort of vaguely moving my hands, but basically you get to we have aphelion and perihelion in astronomy, the nearest and furthest points away from some central orbital pivot, if you will.
Yes.
So everything's going around an orbital pivot. Solar system gets halfway around. Now, instead of going away from the galactic center with that energy, which was thought to be yang and masculine and aggressive and warlike, we are now entering a part of our solar system cycle where we're going back toward galactic center, which is yin, the yin cycle. But we've only just begun since 2012. And so the effects are very weak to start with. But as we approach galactic center, the yin influence becomes stronger. And also another phenomenon occurs. The whole solar system passes through a part of space that is part of this periodic orbit. It's predictable, in other words. It's astronomically based. The whole solar system passes through a region of space that has some kind of energy. Now, what this energy comes from, whether it's a broken up asteroid, like a Van Allen belt, a radiation belt, whether it's like that, or whether it's, I don't even know what its actual nature, I don't know what the phenomenon is, but apparently the nature of the phenomenon is to forcibly raise consciousness on the planet, on any planet in the solar system. And that would be us on Earth. We would be included in that. And so that people who've been incarnating on Earth since after World War II, when the ET phenomenon really took off around the world, that since that time, and this is according to Dolores Cannon, who first broke this idea, that waves, generational waves of star seeds, light workers, volunteered to incarnate on the planet, a few in the first wave, more in the second wave, and even more in the third wave, to enculturate other human beings who had forgotten about our human origin, our true human origin of the Anunnaki, of being built to slave gold. We're wrapping this all around. You see how it all fits together? It's just so crazy. It's what I've spent my whole life trying to figure out. And I'm not the only one. Check out Graham Hancock, the Canadian. He's finally coming into his own. He's finally penetrating into the veil of the mainstream. He's gotten a show. He's gotten publicity. This man is genius. He and his wife, who photographs and documents, and therefore has copyright over all the material they use, which is a big problem for people who publish, getting access to photographs. They travel to these places. They interview people. They document everything. They've been doing it for decades and decades and decades. This is his job. And in repayment, the CIA, through its $million and billion-dollar cover-up, have labeled him a conspiracy theorist, like it's a bad thing. And they've devalued his contribution, or tried to devalue his contribution to this consciousness raising. Shame on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shame on the CIA and the government operatives who want to keep us ignorant. Shame.
Absolutely. And then there's people like me who help, not in a mass way, but, through education, but like on a person by person basis. Like when I help people with the paranormal, we get rid of what's plaguing them, then they can find themselves. We teach them how to find themselves and find their consciousness and find their energy and raise their vibration. And we do this one person at a time. But there's a lot of people out there doing this one person at a time. The lockdowns, people had to face themselves. They had to look in the mirror and see who they were, and they changed because they did not like who they were. It backfired on them. It raised their consciousness.
I've never heard anybody say that, but I agree 100%.
It did. It backfired on them.
It did.
That's why they got rid of the lockdowns.
And we're seeing a backswing now. We're seeing backlash, backswing.
Yes.
Revolution, evolution, resistance against the de-evolution. That's for sure.
Yes.
To go backwards in consciousness makes no sense at all.
No, it doesn't. But on that note, we are 34 minutes over. We did get permission from Howie to go over after I didn't realize it was time to jump off the show. So thank you, Howie. But I have to say thank you so much for coming on. I enjoyed our conversation so much. Cheers.
And I want to shout out a few people in the audience who said some nice things. Thank you. I'm not going to name names. You know who you are, but I appreciate all your support. We are coming into our own as a community, whether our specialty is UFOs, ghosts, cryptoids,
it's all
whatever. We're coalescing in consciousness. I feel it.
Yes, it's all going to come together. We're going to get to where we need to be, where we're supposed to be. And like you said, as we get closer to that center, everything's going to get better.
We will make it better.
We might not.
I'm taking all of this out of the passive tense.
Yeah.
I work with words on a daily basis now. Don't hate me, but I'm helping to train AI to take over the world. No, to give better search engine answers.
Yeah.
No, to take over the world.
So
words are very important,
Yeah.
And I'm tired of being passive. I never play the victim card, even though I've been a victim of the great lie my own life. I don't want to own that.
No.
You can't raise consciousness playing the victim card, right?
No,
we got to stay light, and to counteract gravity, use levity.
There we go.
So, anybody got a good joke?
I don't know.
Take us out on a good joke. Come on.
I don't know any jokes. I don't.
Okay, I have a good joke.
Okay.
Golfer goes out. He's playing around, gets back to the locker room, and he's opening his bag, putting on his clothes, changing back into street clothes. And somebody notices that he's got an extra pair of socks and says, "Hey, man, how come you got an extra pair of socks?" He says, "Oh, I always bring an extra in case I get a hole in one."
That's cute. I get it.
See how that changed the consciousness?
There we go. All right. Thank you once again for coming on the show. Always a pleasure to speak with you. And hopefully we helped to educate some. I know I got educated, and I always love when that happens. I like helping people, and I really think we did that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me with you and with all of you. I am so grateful to know you and be among you.
Absolutely.
You can't imagine how this uplifts me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Howie.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.